Now, I'm going to push us way forward in time. So, you told me that your mother lived up here in Paradise and that you guys had visited her, and that's kind of what got you to settle here in retirement. So, you've retired here to Paradise. We're going all the way forward to 2018. And we have a terrible occurrence that happens here in our area, which is called the Camp Fire.
Yes.
Not campfire, one word, but the Camp Fire, which was a terrible fire that went through the community of Paradise and decimated it. One of the worst fires in California history and maybe even U.S. history. You have quite the story about trying to protect your home through that fire. And you were, 86 at that time?
I think maybe 85, maybe 86, somewhere around there.
Tell us a little bit about your experience that morning, because the fire started fairly early in the morning, waking up and making it through that day.
Let me preface that with one sentence.
Okay.
I had listened very carefully to the October conference. Something President Nelson said stuck in my mind enough to where I treasured it. And he said that it isn't just prophets that can receive revelation. Anyone can who pays the price. I paid the price. And it wasn't easy, and I failed a lot, but I paid the price. So that morning, I woke up and the sky was glowing. It was coming in the windows, and I thought, "Oh, beautiful morning! I'm going to go out and see." So I got dressed real quick, and my husband, who had dementia at the time, he got dressed too, and we walked out the front of our house, and the whole ridge that was out in front of us was on fire and glowing, and the flames and little whirlwinds. I mean, the whole enchilada, but it was a ways away yet. And I prayed within myself, because I knew that if we had to leave, that it would send my husband into terrible confusion. And because he loved that home, it was everything to him. Mm-hmm. I prayed to the Lord, can I stay and fight the fire? And I got an affirmative. And I said, will you help me? Yes. So meanwhile, my neighbors had come over from next door. It was one neighbor and his neighbor next to him, and they said they were going to stay because the fire, the way it worked, the farther up towards Wagstaff and Billy Road, the hotter it was, the worse it was, and I lived down in the lower area. So they figured that possibly we had a chance. And the fire truck had already come to help protect the guy 2 doors down, protect his place. My neighbors filed out, early in the morning.
I was going to say, most of them were gone well before noon.
There was hardly any, was nobody except my next door neighbor left in the whole neighborhood, and I watched 4 homes ignite while I was there, and these houses, they would start to glow, and they'd glow more, and then whoosh, they were gone. They were gone. The one that was directly across from me, the canyon, it took 5 hours for that to burn up because it was a great, big, beautiful 2-story house. And I just ached for that couple because it was their dream home. They had built it. So, anyway, I went and I put nozzles on all of the hoses that were around the house, and I had a lot long hoses and a lot of spigots around. And by that time, it was coming up our slope, and trees were catching on fire, and brush was catching on fire there. And firebrands were coming across as big as your fist. Mm-hmm. And it was starting to light fires. So I was starting to put out fires. And of course, the first place it headed was towards the propane tank. And it had all kinds of brush around it, which was stupid, but you didn't think of those things. And so I soaked that area. I really soaked it hard. And so that one wasn't a danger anymore, but it was going for some manzanita logs that I had stacked up for one of my grandsons who's a sculptor, because I figured that manzanita, he could make beautiful stuff with that. Well, it caught fire, and I could not put that one out, so I just had to let it burn. It's headed towards my front tree and the vinca in my front yard. I tried to put that out. I got it out enough to where it was safe. Then it headed under my deck. And I soaked and soaked and soaked and soaked that and got that out. And then it went around. Meanwhile, it was going everywhere else. And I'd put out one fire and something would say, look that way. I'd look that way, and I'd have to go dashing. 85, 86 years old, run to another hose.
With garden hoses against one of the worst fires in our history.
And I had a flashlight in one hand because I couldn't even see my feet.
Because of the
smoke was so black. Mm-hmm. I had a flashlight in one hand and the hose in the other.
And so that people will understand, down here in the Chico Valley, 10 miles away, for 3 days, we had to drive with our lights on in our cars because you could not see through the smoke.
Yeah.
So in the midst of this fire, I can imagine how dark that must have been for you.
And I had grow boxes out back with vegetables and stuff in them. And the end grow box caught fire. And even the dirt was burning.
Oh, my goodness.
And I couldn't put that out. So one end of my grow box, I haven't got it fixed yet, but I will eventually. And then it headed, there was a digger pine out front that we watched grow since it was a baby. And it was the only decent-looking digger pine I have ever seen because they grow every which way. This one actually had a shape. And it was coming right at that digger pine. And I prayed for that little pine tree that it would make it, and the fire went
My
like
goodness.
that and missed the pine tree. Of course, it meant I had to go after two different things. And then it got under the pallets that my firewood was on. And that was full of mulch, of course. And it kept coming up and coming up and coming up. And I knew that if that firewood caught fire, it was too close to the house.
So what happened while you were trying to get the firewood safe? You did have a fire engine come by, yes?
Yeah, now that's a totally different thing because we didn't get to see our house again for probably a week or two. Mm-hmm. And then they only let us go so far. We couldn't go to the house, but I could look up the hill and see that the house was intact. So I thought, well, at least it's there. And it wasn't until we got ready to move back in that I could actually inspect the house. I went around to the side where the firewood should have been. And the firewood, there was nothing but charred chunks, and they were scattered. And I looked at the house, there was not a smudge on it. I thought, what in the world happened? So by that time, Terry, my neighbor, was back in his house, and I went over and talked with him, and I said, what happened to the firewood? And he said, when the water went off, and I knew that you were gone and you were safe, that's me, he said, I was so exhausted, I went in and I sat down in a chair and I fell asleep. And he said, I slept hard, but he said all of a sudden there was this big flare-up that woke me up. And he said, I looked outside and flames were 30 foot high. And he said, but at the same time, there was this clatter, a whole bunch of racket going on. So he ran outside, and there was a fireman standing next to a fire truck that was right there. And he said, what happened? And the fireman said, well, we were heading down Clark, heading towards Oroville. And he said, something said, turn up Big Sky. Okay, so he turned up Big Sky. And he said, when I got parallel to the back of that house, he said there was this big flare-up of fire. So we just took off across lots, and we put it out and scattered the wood.
So they were not initially supposed to go in that direction, and he felt the Spirit say,
turn up that street.
Wow, and that was right at the right moment.
Yeah.
And this was after 2 or 3 other fire trucks had just passed by your house and said, get out.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So, and that wasn't the end of the miracles, for a while. But
yeah.
Anyway, it was... I never thought, you live your life pretty much routine, and you never think in your dotage, practically, that all hell's going to break loose.
And it did for you, literally. Could you even take time for a drink? Or
I think I ran in and I smeared some peanut butter on a piece of bread and got a drink of water. That was it for that day.
Yeah.
Oh, and my husband at about 11:30, he says... He came out. He had COPD besides everything else that was going on, so he was staying out of the way. And he said, "I'm hungry. I'm going to go get a hamburger." And he jumped in his truck. And I said, "If you leave, you won't be able to get back." And he didn't pay any attention. He says, "Are you coming?" And I says, "I'll come later." And he headed out. He was missing for 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah. And
let's come back to how you found him. But you're still trying to keep this house from burning.
This house.
And again, so people understand, this started in the morning.
It started in the morning.
You fought this fight until what time in the night?
I think it was about 7:30 when they shut the water off.
Wow.
I mean, it was totally dark. It was November anyway.
And you're still trying to fight,
I'm still
and the
trying
water
to
gets
fight
turned off.
Yeah, I'm still trying to fight the fire under that wood.
Uh-huh.
And my neighbor tried to, and together we tried to do it. And when they shut the water off, I asked the Lord, should I leave?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. You sure? No. Will I still have a home? Yes. Are you sure? Yes.
I told you.
I think he was getting exasperated with me by then. So I had my go bag in my car, and Mel had one in his truck. So, and I headed out, and I headed up Clark, and it was an inferno. It was just.
And again, so people understand, there were really only kind of 2 roads out of Paradise, which is a mountain community, and by 7 o'clock at night, they were engulfed.
Yeah. Now, I guess they could have, well, I don't think you could have gone down Pence because that was already burned out.
Yep.
But there was Skyway and Clark. There wasn't a soul on Clark Road. I turned around and I headed down towards Oroville. And I was going to turn on Pence Durham Road, and it was blocked.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to go over branches in the road. The sides of the road were on fire. Propane tanks were popping all over the place. You could hear them pop, pop, pop,
You must have been praying through that whole drive.
Yeah. And, I wasn't afraid at all.
Really? And you shared with me that you had kind of some miraculous experiences while you were fighting the fire about the air quality, and because why you weren't overcome by smoke is amazing.
When I finally got a glimpse of myself in the mirror, when I got where I landed, I looked like a gray ghost. All you could see was white eyeballs. But I never felt any smoke in my lungs. I had no smoke in my lungs. I don't know how that happened. And my eyes didn't burn. And I was just fine. And how I kept on my feet, because I already was very arthritic by that time, and bone on bone in my hips and my knees, the whole thing. And
you shared that you felt presence of other people.
Yeah, it was like I was in a bubble of just this big invisible bubble, and I could feel spirits. I don't know who. I wish I could have identified them. I kind of think that Jared might have been one of them, because he sure would have been.
Yep.
Maybe Douglas. No, Douglas wasn't gone yet. He was still alive, but Jared was gone. And maybe my mom and dad, maybe.
I am sure.
Maybe the Lord, because I was shouting out loud to the Lord through this smoke. And so I don't know who it was, but I could sure feel a presence in there with me. One more thing about the fire. I could hear deer running a whole, I can't even think of the word.
Herds of deer
running through my property, running south towards Oroville. I could hear rabbits go. And I couldn't see them, but I could hear them. And it was that dark that you didn't even know what was around you. I never did find out how Mel got down the hill or how long it took him, but my chiropractor had a patient come in, and she offered us a place to stay, the chiropractor and his wife and myself. So we did, and this was on Friday. This was Friday. Mel had been gone during that time. So we did. And I went to the steak center and got some Sunday clothes, and I got some for Mel just in case. The dress I found looked like a Mennonite dress. It was dowdy and handmade and long and funny, and I thought, oh, what the heck. And anyway, a whole day went by, and then...
you must have been frantic.
I wasn't. I knew he was all right until the third day, till Saturday.
So what gave you that sense of peace?
It was the Spirit that gave me. But, sometimes you start doubting in spite of it as the time goes on.
Right.
And I was beginning to get a little bit, more than a little concerned. There was an all-points bulletin out for this elderly gentleman in a pickup truck, etc. And... anyway, Chester, the chiropractor, says, I've got to go to my office because the fire is threatening Oroville. I need to get my records and so on and so forth. I'll be back in a little while. So he took off, and when he came back an hour later, Mel was trailing behind him. Mel had ended up at his office at the time that he got there. And Mel had been, now I got his, my credit card bill the next month. Mel had been in Hamilton City. He had been in Biggs. He had been in Gridley. He had meandered around. When he got hungry, he would stop at a restaurant. That's why it was on the credit card. And get something to eat. When he got sleepy, he'd pull over and sleep in the truck.
Car.
All those 3 days. And then somehow, how he ever found Chester's office, I have no idea. Yeah. So that was another...
Tender mercy.
Tender mercy.
Yes. That is an amazing story. I wish, truly, that we had 3 more hours with you. You have been a delightful interview and so many wonderful stories. If you could leave one last message for our viewers and for your own posterity, what message would you leave them?
I think since we've been talking about that day And I've never had a repeat of that. It's been very difficult for me to get that direction back, because an awful lot of things have happened since that have been hard things that I've had to go through basically by myself.
Yeah.
But I guess because I was so much up against it that the Lord really did his part. But I would say keep that spirit with you. Live as close to perfection as you can possibly do, and that's not very close usually. But at least if you've got it on your mind, and when your temper flares up, whoa, or when you're going to do something crummy, or maybe hurt somebody's feelings, whoa, and refine yourself as best you can in this mortal life, because when you're really up against it, then the Lord will be on your side, and He'll help you.
You are an amazing woman with an amazingly strong spirit and a joyful, optimistic look on life, and we just so appreciate you. Thank you, Dorrie.
Oh, thank you.